Well, everybody, welcome to another Living on Music Quick Hit. And it is a real honor to have this gentleman who, if you're a music fan of this region, you know who he is. John Previti, welcome again to Living on Music, man.
Thank you, Steve. Thanks for having me on.
My pleasure. Your dear pal and my buddy, Dave Chappell, basically was the kind of the PR guy to set us up today, because what we're going to talk about is obviously a big deal coming up. Pre-Labor Day weekend, or going into Labor Day weekend, September 2nd. It is the Danny Gatton birthday celebration that you guys are doing again to honor this guy. I want to tell you a real quick story that I mentioned to Dave. I was up emceeing the Albert Castiglia show up in New Jersey at the Pavilion in the Pines, the Lizzie Rose outdoor venue up there. And I had a guy who was about in his late 60s, early 70s, and he was a volunteer there helping set up and do things at the Pavilion. And I told him I was from DC, or came up from there. And he said, I have one thing I want to say about DC. I said, what? And he goes, Danny Gatton. And I'm like, and I was able to turn around and say, oh my gosh, and talk about you and Dave and everybody that's going to be involved again in this celebration on Friday, September 2nd. Talk to me a little bit about it, John, of what you know about it. Is it generally the same lineup and the same tribute kind of evening about Danny?
It's pretty similar to last year. Of course, it'd be Dave and myself, Pete Ragusa on drums.
Great.
Big Joe Mayer on drums and vocals. Steve Wolf will be playing bass as well. Wow. We have Pete Kennedy, who's been out of the area for some time with his group, Pete and Mara. So he'll be playing, and we have Red Volker.
Wow. Yes.
So he's sort of local now, I guess. He's in Southern Virginia, not too far.
Wow.
So that ought to be exciting.
It really sounds it, John. And what it is it's honoring a guy who, again, we lost 28 years ago or so at 49, and it really broke many people's hearts, but his legacy has continued. I loved, and this kind of, when we talk a little bit about the music that you guys play each time, I loved, there was one description of blues, jazz, country, and rockabilly. Danny mixed all these together, sometimes in the space of a single bar. I love that. Is the music that you guys do each time, is it mixed? Do you change it each time to try to separate some of his genres? How do you pick the music that you guys do at these wonderful tributes?
We have, like you said, what Danny did is such a part of our repertoire and our legacy now that it's really hard to separate it a lot. The way he treated different songs, and he learned from the people before him,
right?
And so this is a continuing thing. I remember when Danny told me many years ago, he said, back in the day, it didn't matter if you're in a country band or a rock and roll band, you were still expected to know how to play everything.
Right.
And you had to know the standards and even the top 40 of the time.
Sure.
So we try to make that our business. It's those are the people that inspire us. So in any case, we will have a certain segment where we'll play a tribute to, say, Joe Stanley, who is the great sax player singer, right, who was one of Danny's heroes. And so it'll feature some Louis Prima stuff. We'll get specific about that. And but even doing that, what did Louis Prima do? He took standards and made them into shuffles or what have you. And right. So I think we just, whatever grabs us at the moment.
Oh, yeah. And, speaking of grabbing you at the moment, I mean, you spent 18 years playing with this guy. You really were part of his world when he was who he was. And, I think what you said once, he called himself a Whitman sampler of music, which I love that description. That kind of fits what you were just talking about. What is the uniqueness of playing bass with Danny Gatton? And you just talked about how you guys playing now. What was it back then that really inspired you to play with this guy?
Well, I guess that a couple things. He was so authentic and everything he played. If he played Fats Domino, it sounded like you were with Fats Domino. It's hard to explain because he's playing guitar, but it
Right.
always felt real.
Right.
And the strength with which he played, his time was perfect. He could hear everything and he knew what everything was supposed to be doing. And so he rarely would tell me what to play.
Right.
Although occasionally he might give me a look. You know, I've never looked at anything but him when we were playing, for one
Right.
thing. I was always, and he might give me a bass line while he was doing all the other stuff and give me a hint of something to do. But
Oh, man.
yeah, it was pretty wild. Dave Elliott, of course, knew Danny well before I did, and
Right.
said the same thing. It felt like telepathy. You know, his eyebrow would go up and you would know what he meant. I don't know. That's what happened. And you knew something was going to happen, and somehow you knew what it was going to be. You know,
That's
he was so powerful. He'd just take you with him.
right.
And I noticed a lot of great musicians like that. Charlie Bird was the same way. You know.
Right, exactly. And I know Dave Chappell, had a little bit of a history with Danny as well, right?
Oh yeah.
And that was in formative years, wasn't it?
Oh yeah. Yeah. He said he got a lesson with him, and Danny showed him if he had a cigarette, he'd show him everything he knew in 5 minutes. And Dave said he didn't have a cigarette, but he still showed him everything.
Oh my gosh. Well, this is going to be, again, one of those nights that the Birchmere is going to be so excited to have back, because they're going to, you're going to pack it in. You're going to bring Danny Gatton's music back. When I interviewed Gary Olsey and Michael Jaworek for Living on Music, twice with Gary, once about the book, the New All Roads Lead to the Birchmere book, which I know you have seen and know well. But it basically, they talked about Danny with a lot of admiration. Obviously, there was one story where a woman called the Birchmere and said, "Hey, it's really loud there." And they said, "Well, where are you?" Down the hall. She said, "I'm across the street." So he was cranking. And so Gary said, "Hey, Danny, maybe you could turn around your amp." You were probably on stage with him. And he was like, "What do you mean? Really? You want me to turn it around?" And then, boom. His level of playing, though, John, I mean, what separated him from other guitarists, from then and now?
Well, a couple things I mentioned. One of them was strength. You can learn Danny's notes, but he's played with so much power.
Yeah.
And there's such a center to
Right.
what he did, and everything he played, it sounded like that's all he did. Right. If he played country, it sounded like that's all he did. Rockabilly, jazz. I would play sets with him. He'd play the whole first set with just his thumb, like Wes Montgomery, just because he was checking it out and he knew how to. So I think it's so authentic and strong. Not that other people aren't authentic, you know what I mean? It's just to bring all those things together and make it sound like music and not just throwing things around.
Yeah, absolutely. As a intimate part of his years of playing, any story that stands out? Maybe there's probably a lot of them, but is there something that you remember about Danny that will always ping in people's minds who are big fans even?
Well, there was one night, I'm trying to take too much time. There was one night where I was kind of tired because I hadn't slept the night before, and I was up all day, and I was leaning against my amp. I was playing bass guitar, and I had my legs crossed. He said, "Hey, John, stand up." I said, "No." I thought I was being funny. He made a fist that looked bigger than my head, and he said, "We're going to talk during the break." And of course, I was so afraid. And so we finished, and we sat down at the table. Instead of beating me up, he's talked to me for about a half an hour, and he said, one of the things he said was that if you don't get it together, you're not going to be able to play. And he said, "I don't just mean with me, I mean in general. You can't do that. You have to be professional." And instead of firing me or taking me outside, he did that. And that's changed my life,
Oh my God.
So you know what I mean? That was Danny. That's what I would leave with people.
Well, John, that's what's really special about having you, because of the intimacy of playing and performing and learning music back with Danny. That is absolutely wonderful. You have been continuing, though, just to talk about John Previti for a moment. You've continued to play for many years. recently, as things are starting to open up, let's hope, with this stuff going up, down, and sideways. I've seen you on social media playing a lot. What have been some of the things that you've enjoyed recently? I know there's been some wonderful collaborations.
Well, it's been great playing with Dave Chappell as often as we can. And he's another very powerful musician and very authentic.
Yep.
And the love he and we have for Danny and the music and his legacy is apparent all the time.
Oh, man.
I don't get to play with Jimmy Stephenson as much as I'd like. Jimmy is a wonderful musician.
Right. Sure is.
Great singer. Tommy Lepson, Pete Ragusa. Been doing getting to play with them. Dean Rosenthal up in Annapolis, different things. So I'm staying pretty busy.
Yeah, you can tell. And I'm not surprised, John, with your legacy of your own. And, one day I'd love to do, again, we've talked about doing one of the Living on Music deep dives. And I'd love to do that with you to learn about your entire career. But this has just been wonderful to talk about Danny Gatton, and also reminding people, birchmere.com, go right to the ticket calendar, and it is on Friday, September 2nd. It is Danny Gatton, the birthday celebration, and he would have been 77 years old, I believe, 2 days after your show. And so you are celebrating with an incredible lineup. Dave Chappell, thank you for bringing me and John together. John, I'm going to keep in touch, watch what you're doing. I love seeing you play. I love the fact that you would share some of these intimate parts of Danny Gatton's career. Thanks so much for being on Living on Music, man. Again.
Thank you, Steve. You're a good man.
Well, we'll be in touch, and I hope to see you at the Birchmere soon. Thanks very much.
Thank you.